So we do that?
Good.
Okay, so guys, I was in this work stream. I'm going to present what we discussed, but please chip in. So here's what happened. We had a small number of folk in our group. It was basically product council people. It was Lewis and Michael and me until probably about halfway into the conversation. And so, and also innocent. And so our conversation started off by going actually towards a little bit about hackathons again. And I was also giving the guys the update that I was kind of standing in for the proxy for the merchant team who weren't able to be part of the community event this time. So, so I showed them what I've been talking with Paul and Justice about in behind the scenes in terms of what the goal board might be for merchants. And what we'd effectively locked in on is a smaller goal board than we didn't manage to achieve what was at the last goal board for last PI because of resourcing issues as normal. And so actually we got pretty close, I think, with some of the Actio blocklist demonstration work, and we want to continue that. So we want to get to a place where there is some kind of demonstration of the existing open source functionality in a shared world. How might blocklisting fit in as a shared service into Modulip and start to show that marketplace mindset and the fact that there's more OSS connected than the core clearing system. And our FRMS story starts to come to life. So we've put the QR code demo out of scope for now on this. We are focused in on, hopefully, if we can manage to get contribution, and Lewis is the center of my ask here, around a pay me as a deliverable demo. We think that if we start to show things to users, particularly with, for me, a Rwanda lens, because of the work that's going on there around merchant schemes, if we start to show folk how customer choice works, how aliases move around, merchant lifecycle management, if we start to show it the way that we've done for the 3PPI recently and the CBDC hackathon and the High People hackathon, we'll hopefully get people excited about it and get things moving. So I was presenting this to the guys and I said to them, look, extra resources that would be available and really valuable is actually, I wonder, how do we recreate the energy that we got around the ISO hackathon week? We entered a competition as a community. It was an initiative that was seeded by Michael and by Adrian, and a real community piece of work came to life, and we ended up winning that ISO hackathon. And as a consequence, we now have new workstream material and new workstream activity and energy around ISO. So how might we start to recreate that? This became our conversation. And so actually, we got ourselves into a bit of a brainstorm. And I wanted to get the guys to tell you what we were kind of thinking about this. But basically, for advocacy work out there in the market, we don't yet have a lot of training material deeply connected to scheme propositions around merchants. What's the story with merchants and merchant request to pay and all these different channel use cases? What's the story with merchants and 3PPI? How will onboarding work whenever we get merchants working? All these questions that should come up as soon as someone starts to think about merchants as a scheme. Can we get ahead of the game? That's the kind of things that I would love to be solving within our community work. So guys, why don't I hand over to you and you say what you think. Where did we land in that conversation? What do we want next?
Michael, do you want to take it away, or should I kick us off?
Why don't you take it away, Lewis?
Sure. I think the way I'm kind of just rethinking about it now is that we have capabilities in our APIs, and we talk about them and say, our API does this, our API does that, such and such. And then when it comes to time to showing those capabilities, we go, well, we don't have a demo for that, or we don't have, that's not quite working, so we have to, mock this out or pretend that this section of that works. And I think what we really were talking about in our breakout session was, how do we make things more real? We've done it a bit for the 3PPI use case, especially from the perspective of fintech wanting to connect to Moduloop over this overlay services lens or components. How do we make that real for merchants? Whether those are merchants that are whether they're connecting via a DFSP or by a PISP, and how do we connect the different use cases into the actual API calls? We were talking about, okay, well, merchant request to pay is one use case we have. We've got the PISP request to pay, which is another way to maybe do a similar thing. We also talked about, well, peer-to-peer is also a way to pay merchants, as long as the transaction is labeled correctly and there's the right rules set up so that the data comes through and the correct fees and interchange sorts of fees and whatnot are applied at the switch. Bless you, Miller. And so I think we're just talking about what do we need to do to make these things more real. And the key idea we circulated around was, in January, can we hold a hack week? Can we hold a 1 week long event where we get together, we try and get a similar level of energy, but instead of having an external hackathon, something internal to the Moduloop community, and we think really clearly about an end user and someone to pitch this to. And I think we were talking about Rwanda and specifically participants or DFSPs in Rwanda, to get them excited about, hey, here's the things that are coming your way and here are the possibilities for you. I think that was my takeaway, Liz-Leanne. Michael, feel free to add other aspects or things that I might have missed.
Sure.
While I look at my notes again.
Yeah, so we were also thinking that all of what you say, Lewis, is true. There were a couple of other things we were thinking about. First of all, Liz-Leanne confessed to feeling depressed about the amount of work a DFSP would have to do to interact with a 3 PPI, with a third-party payment initiator. So we thought that we could probably get to a position where a DFSP didn't have to do any work at all to interact with
install payment manager.
Sorry?
Other than install payment manager.
Other than install payment manager, which of course they don't want to do anyway, so that's not really work. So that would be a useful part. Exactly, that's right. I never had more fun in my life, which tells you what kind of life I had. What was I going to say? Oh yes. So so that was a part of the demonstration as well. The other part of the demonstration we thought that would be useful is, as you know, we're currently doing ISO 20022 work in Rwanda. And we fantasized about a situation where we could have a third-party payment initiator using the Moduloop API, which was talking to a DFSP and through the DFSP to a Moduloop switch, which was using ISO 20022 messages. This would be a doubly good thing in that there are currently no ISO 20022 messages that properly cover the third-party payment initiator space. So that would be good. And we also thought a little bit, yes, there it is, that we might look at including in this actually connecting Google's GPay app so that we could show the GPay app interacting with an ISO 20022 based Moduloop system.
So these are all ideas of the kind of things teams could choose to get behind and make real, so that we have this kind of starting point for advocacy materials, exec level materials, and even the basis of training materials for hub operators and how to get started with 3PI and schemes, how to get started with 3PI. Because at the moment, we have technology, and we don't have an asset build behind it to get it actually into the hands of market. And we think we have a few people who are very interested in it, but how can we actually help them with the advocacy work as we go is kind of where my brain is at. Now, it's, I think, an awesome idea, but it needs a lot of work to make it real. And so I started to brainstorm after we finished, like, there are critical success factors to even getting this off the ground. we would need to find a date in an event that's force function. We need a community to drive this, and maybe Lewis or Michael have enough bandwidth to do that, but what if they don't? We may need to get community council on board or some other hack organization to actually facilitate the concept of the hack week. We were not the facilitators of the BIS hackathon. We attended, and mostly attendance meant turn up for a few meetings but do our work in our team, and then at the end of it have this video kind of pitch completely ready by a certain time and date. But then behind that, all the facilitation of that wasn't zero, and so we need to make sure that that was possible if we really truly wanted to do this in a hack week kind of way. We do really need that central team of what tools need to be in the sandbox to make this come alive such that there are real demos. And we should have a lot of them now, but what's missing? We haven't really truly had the time to think about it, because I think the other critical success factors, we need to sort them out before we then get into the details of, well, can we actually make this a reality? The output we create will not necessarily be that output list that I presented there. It's the output based on who chooses to participate. And the more participation we can get, the more bits of output we might get, and the more exciting this might be as an event. But it's an ask back to the community to go, is this a good idea? Are you behind it? Do we put more energy into it? And anyone's welcome to speak at that point, because I think what we're definitely going to do is in the goal board linked to the existing work, but this is a concept at best. So anyone got any reaction to that?
I think, sorry, I know I was presenting it, but I do have another thought that just kind of occurred to me is it also could be an opportunity for community members who want to get involved but don't quite know how yet. Maybe you're lurking on the sidelines, to have a really clear, narrow scope for saying, hey, maybe you've been around a little bit, maybe you're interested in playing around with modular, but learning a bit more about it. This is a great way to come and do that, and join a team or make up your own team as well to do that.
So before we move on to the next report back, if anyone has any reaction going, that's a silly idea, or actually, do you know what, we should really do that, either direction, just react. It's a very interesting concept, but it's a community driven concept.
I have two points, Leslie, if it is okay. So first one to this one, I really like the convergence of the ISO messaging stream and the 3 PPI and this merchant as well. So that is great to see, and it has to be compatible, at least when we are done with it during the next PI, the PI 16. The second one, I really wanted to appreciate all the Workstream owners, especially those who showed good perseverance to hang in there. So hopefully the community will support them moving forward. Thank you.
So I think that was Sam volunteering to do the work, wasn't it, Leslie Ann? That's what I heard.
Maybe. We had the idea that maybe we could choose a week to do this when there's naturally a little bit more contribution possibility. I don't know, because everybody's got their own commercial imperatives, and it's figuring out that way to how do we actually take people's time to do something like this. And the ISO week worked, but it was a force and function because the dates were out of our control, and the team got in behind it in their spare time. So how do we create the same kind of vibe? And what would people get behind is what I'm worried about, and what I'd like to kind of solve maybe with the community council before we decide whether we do this or not. Okay.
Much to say, except I like the idea.
Good, super. So any more comments on that, or shall we go to the next? Miller, do you want to say something? He appeared on my screen. His mic must be open.
I have appeared on your screen. Yes.
The name did.
So on the RBAC stuff, yeah. So we did talk through sort of the outlines of what we would need in that. And as Paul had walked us through what had been done already, we identified a few places where I think a narrow path through the remaining facets would be useful. And in specifically thinking about how one deploys the resources for the RBAC into an operating environment. So we want to be sure that you can specify policy using a reasonable document, that policy can be ingested by the system and it can be tested at runtime, but the process for updating it also has to be thought about so that does not become a vulnerability. And so we thought about a little bit about how the code is modified. When someone makes a change to code and issues a PR, that PR first has to go through a smoke test. That's a bunch of stuff applied to it. We then go through a set of reviews, and the multiple reviews have to occur before it's actually merged into code base. So following a similar kind of, as Paul called it, maker checker on the policy itself is a reasonable strategy that you could see wrapped around this. So showing that sort of end-to-end process, not necessarily complete at each step, but showing that the length is good. I think that's a good target because it shows how we can then start fleshing this out in an environment in which it just gets better over time, but it's not missing something along the way, or that we would have to hand wave around the fact that modifying the security policy ends up being a gigantic security vulnerability all by itself. You can imagine somebody coming in at midnight and giving themselves permissions and then running off with the money. So I think we want to be careful about the structure of it. So Paul laid out a few things on how RBAC might be done. And then I should let you, Paul, talk to how it fits in with some of the other stuff, because you had some ideas about how the micro front ends and also how the IC, the updates the IC would work, and how the existing finance front end would interact with this stuff.
Yeah, thank you, Miller. Yeah, so that was the first part, was deciding how we could sort of update the current structure of what we put together to account for tighter controls around that maker checker and the RBAC policy and security policy updates. Then the next part is a leftover from last PI, which is audit trail. That's fundamental to an RBAC implementation. So we agreed that although building an audit trail is a complex task and activity that I don't think we'll get to in this PI, we are likely to be able to finish the first one, which is capture the read-only logs information with enough information in those logs so we can perform an audit. So that seemed important. And then the rest of the story is already about how we can get people out there using the work effort that's been built here. So the first part would be to include the loading of the micro front ends into the financial portal, so that people using that financial portal can take advantage of that. Ideally, it would be better to sort of refactor existing functionality into the new, and in fact, that's still the intention long term. But to get people to use it with the least sort of impact on their current business, if we just allowing micro front ends that provide extra functionality to be added into the existing structure, then that would be a good direction to take it in. And then the next part is building this RBAC and business ops framework into the deployment, standard deployment of Moduloop. In other words, adding it into the IC that's currently available in OSS. That would be a good goal as well. So those are our 4 epics that we've outlined here. What does that mean? What would success look like? To have the framework in production somewhere, and then to get some collaboration on the documentation and collaboration on the building of the front end, micro front ends. So there's a lot there. So what sort of people would we need? What sort of experts? You know, people understand the business processes at a hub and are able to express some sort of expertise there. That would be fantastic. It would allow us to sort of build on those processes and document them and take that forward. Infrastructure skills, adding this into an infrastructure as code environment, we need those skills too. And then building those extra micro front ends or finishing off the parts that we need to talk about, that would be backend security, backend software engineers and UI UX software engineers as well are the sort of skills that would skills in the community who could contribute to this would make a big difference. That's our requirement anyway. And then these are the success goals that we decided. I don't think they're worded that well, in fact, but really that's to outline Miller's summary there on the RBAC maker checker, to be able to create an environment, an RBAC enforcement environment where you can ensure that your RBAC policies are in fact being enforced the way they should be. For example, if you have a person playing a role as a compliance officer, then there are certain actions that they definitely aren't also allowed to take or have permission for. And really we're talking about setting up a system with checks and balances in place to make sure that that cannot happen. Was that a good summary, Miller?
Worked for me. I enjoyed that update, and I'm really pleased that we're seeing progress on processes to the level that you're now ready for some of the business side of things to kind of kick in and do some business process framework work. I can imagine who we can get to support you, Paul. I mean, obviously you already have Paul Makin. I can help, and I actually think Sudhir was around in the community quite a bit this week, and he may well be interested in our process work. He's certainly indicated to me in the past that he'd be up for doing some work on these success criteria. So I'm excited.
Yeah. And the point is, if you write it down, then people can iterate on it, you know. Yeah. So having it documented somewhere is an important step.
I also think our focus Cybrin, whilst they're integrating into their standard existing processes, the core modular app engine, it'd be a really interesting validation point to see that we are, you know, building the APIs that work for them too. So it's good. I think this is the right time for a bit of business and tech team to do a bit more collaboration, which is perfect. Okay, our third, maybe fourth breakout room, I'm just getting my list up again, was, I think, the infrastructure as code team, am I right? Yes, the infrastructure as code team and release 14 in general.
Yeah, we joined and there was only 3 of us, so we distributed ourselves amongst the other groups.
Fair enough. The reality is that I think we may even have hit something like a half-term week, and there's quite a few people aren't around. So we'll get these boards sorted, and we'll get them locked in before the town hall. That
said, I think Miguel's got some thinking already. So Miguel, if you wanted to share.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing new here, as Lewis said. I mean, this is very much about continuing work with version 14. Removing the external dependencies, creating the example dependency Helm charts, also introducing Finance Portal v2 to it, as well as aligning them to the ISE requirements. And that also then comes down to the ISE stuff, which is about making sure it works with, ensuring that it works with the latest version, the regression test run, it's aligned to the external dependency separation strategy that we have, and also need to make sure that there is some kind of strategy or agreement on how there can be some merging between Sandbox, Mini Loop, or something like that. Or maybe there won't be, I don't know, but I think there needs to be some discussion around that.
Yeah.
So
No,
definitely
100% agree.
Sounds awesome.
So I think that's in a nut. Yeah, sorry.
Obviously, yes, and one thing, I'm curious if it's possible. It may not be possible. We, Modulit Foundation, host the Rwanda Sandbox environment in AWS. It's connected to their fronts and their integration, but it's their AWS. And it currently doesn't have 3PPI in it. It does use IAC. So it could be an awesome success criteria to say, let's test that we're able to upgrade the Rwanda environment to have 3PPI in Rwanda. If we can't do it, I'm gonna have to figure out how to do it elsewhere. Put it that way. So it's something to consider in this team.
Yeah.
If you want to,
I mean, there's no reason that we couldn't.
other than we need to obviously kind of do it in, they're in the middle of SIT and the like. So we need to just collaborate with Judith, who's managing that project. But they really truly need 3PPI in their world. So I'm very keen to get them a plan, to get them released. I don't have a plan yet. So if you saw that as a success criteria, I would back you all the way and figure out how we get it done.
Okay.
An idea for consideration.
Sure. Okay. So do we see that as version 14 or do we see that as version 13? Because at the moment, version 13 already has the 3PPI.
Yeah, 13.1.
Part of it. So that would be 13.10.
Whatever version it is, I'd like them to be our flagship market that keeps in touch with releases. And how might we do that? Where they are is not with 3PPI. And we don't have a plan to how we keep them current. And it might be a good test bed to think about that.
Yeah.
It certainly would be a community-driven effort right now. It would convert over to them owning it once they've made some fundamental decisions in their own use of Modulit. At the moment, it's a sandbox.
Okay. All right. Cool.
I'd also love to give them Lewis's sandbox portal, the ViewPress portal, and I don't know if that's part of ViewPress. So as you have those conversations about what's actually in there and how do you think about it, Rwanda is possibly a very good focusing country to think about. But that's just asks from me. So you can come and find me anytime you want to chat about that and tell me what you are able to do and what you're not, and we'll figure out the rest elsewhere.
Okay, sure.
Super. Okay, good. I think similarly, Miguel, you had the board ready. So did Michael and co on the FX and the ISO front, because we didn't have deep dive conversations on that. If there's people who are interested in contributing to progress on the things that Michael proposed, we'd want to find them after this main event, because we didn't get them in the room in time for us to have that conversation. Who was next on the list? I was going to find, Sam, the tools side of thing.
Yeah, so we looked at the testing toolkit side of things. We've kind of used the PI15 deck and added the slide that. Let me quickly share that. So can you see okay, I think you're seeing slide number 16. Let me go to slide number 32. So as same with the IAC, what Miguel mentioned. So we want to have a separate session to talk about infrastructure as code, and this one as well with the payment manager team. But we were able to capture a few things on the testing toolkit side of things. Won't go into too much detail on all of the epics and measurability on success, how we defined it, but two items on the success criteria here. One is that we want to have at least one existing implementer adopt the TTK for validating switch deployment. And running it in their like day-to-day jobs, cron jobs and things like that. And we want to have the course published so that it's readily available for anyone who wants to learn and start using it in their framework. There are some improvements in the key epics we've discussed here, but essentially all that is driving towards this criteria. And there are some things here which will include, for example, we want the FXP implementation to be able to use the testing toolkit. The API is already onboarded, as we talked about it on day one. So hopefully whatever enhancements, whatever support is needed on the FXP API, the TTK can be used for that. Another epic here is about generalizing the tool so that it can be used with any API. So right now it can be used with synchronous APIs without any issue. Anyone can load a new synchronous API and get started. On the asynchronous API, there is another additional step where the callback mapping should happen. So want to automate that process as well so that it can be done using the user interface itself. So once you can create a new deck list, then we'll move these slides over there as well. There.
Super, thank you very much, Sam. So is there anyone else in the community who's got a report back kind of goal board ready but didn't have a breakout? So for example, Lewis, I think you were thinking about some 3PPI stuff, for example.
Yeah, let me share that. I mean, it's only to recap what I'd already shared yesterday.
Yeah.
But what I would like to highlight, I just looked at it again, and that was 3PPI goal that I had initially written down, and this is something we'd already had and updated a little bit, was 3PPI ready for production use in existing/new that can employ with some handholding. That pretty much echoes what you were just talking about with the IAC and the Mojo Loops V14 release stuff. So and also there's other points here about payment manager support for DFSPs, which we talked about. And so we're seeing similar things, similar roadmap items come up, which is cool because we get to, I guess, pick these elements that will unlock, or these bits of work can unlock possibilities across multiple work streams. But yeah, we're going to have next Wednesday, we're going to have a call to talk about this in more detail. Is the plan?
Awesome. So I'm not sure if anyone else is kicking around any ideas of goal boards that they want to set for the next quarter. I can't see anyone in the chat that I know of that has a goal board ready. Feel free to interject if you plan to do any work and you want to talk about it. A question out to the various teams. How will people find you if they want to know more about your work and get involved in any kind of way, or know how you'd value work? Is Slack the right place, for example, for us to send folk to if that comes up?
It is for me.
Yeah, sure. As far as I'm concerned.
Slack is the best option.
Awesome.
Mail me or anything, really.
Awesome. Anything comes my way, we will use Slack to try and get some conversation going. And Sam made the great point, actually, if anyone from Actio is here and want to talk about, I think part of the report out, they did talk about what they're planning in their own PI. Anyone from Justice, are you here? Don't think I see Justice today. No, I don't see anyone, Sam, from the Actio workstream.
Cool. Yeah, hopefully we'll follow up in that open session. I think Justice offered. So yeah, I was just eager to hear if anyone has to share something. Thank you.
I think it's a good reminder. The Actio team are planning that session about a month's time, 24th of November, and so we'll try to get some reminders out as part of the community to that event, to the wider people group, to remind to sign up.
Cool.
Good reminder. Okay, Simeon, I think it's back to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Leslie, and everyone for your updates. This roundly brings us to the end of our convening with a few, actually with some time to spare. Just checking on the clock here. I don't see Paula on yet, but I do want to thank everybody for your participation and for all the work that has gone into the report outs, the very encouraging discussions. I also recognize that there are some work streams that will be scheduling meetings in the coming weeks. And if anyone, if you'd like to plug into those, feel free to reach out either to the workstream lead or to myself, and we'll be happy to plug you into those. Miller, do you have any comments before we close? If you're
I'd be happy to say a few things. I'm just thrilled that we're making progress in this ridiculous time that we're in right now with the lockdowns and the virtuality of everything. But it's great to see people coming together and helping out here. I want to also make one more comment here that Innocent actually called it out in the chat, and he said the 3PPI is an angel for fintech. 1000%. This is a way that we believe we can actually get these overlay services a home within a Mojaloop community. Obviously, there has some convincing to do that the regulators would want to be okay with offering that in at a national level when they deploy. But systems like as is done in Myanmar, where it's a commercial system, make that possible. And I would love to see people iterate with that now that we have a fairly complete solution there, and tell us how we might take that forward. Yeah, there's a bunch of work here, obviously, coming forward. And the big issue that Simeon's working with everyone on is to find community resources and to bring them in. And we want to be as thoughtful as we can about the application of those resources. So very pleased to see the planning that's going forward here. They're quite realistic goals. And I'm hopeful that we will find the time and resources to bring that to close here in the next PI. And Simeon, could you remind us, when is the next convening scheduled at this time?
The next convening is scheduled for January. I believe that will be the 25th to the 27th of January.
Yeah, that'll be a whole new world by then. 2022 will be out of this pandemic. Gold will be raining from the sky. It will be a brand new world. I'm sure of it. So nevertheless, obviously, wherever we are, I hope everyone has a great holiday season here coming up. And you have my gratitude for all of the attention and energy that's been put into this. I'm just very pleased with this. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Miller. Paula would have wanted me to let you know that we are looking forward and we are working towards having an in-person convening, hopefully at some point next year, fingers crossed. So Michael, your wish to be in Zanzibar may be granted. Keep your fingers crossed on that one. Again, in the coming weeks, there is still quite a bit of community activities that will require engagement. Do keep an eye out on your email inbox and on Slack for any information regarding the elections, the PI planning for work streams that were not able to do their breakouts today, and a couple of those things. So in the next 2 to 3 weeks, there's still lots more activities going on. I beg your indulgence and your involvement. With that, I will close it out. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day and week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.